Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity, counting down my top 25 favorite episodes of the Star Trek franchise. Have I been going for 2 years? Almost 2 years, I believe. Yeah, with this, but anyway, we're
That
down.
that would make sense where we are about that
Yeah,
long. Yeah.
yeah, about that long. So we're down to my number four. So we're now getting into the nitty gritty of my favorite episodes of the entire franchise. And my number four is City on the Edge of Forever, which is my favorite episode of Star Trek, the original series. I think that's pretty well known. It's funny because because the only other two original series episodes I had in my top 25 were back in like number 25 and number 22. So I know there was a giant gap because I'm just not as big of a fan of the original series. But I noticed that all three episodes that were in my top 25 were all in season one of the original series, which I think is easily the best season. That's just my opinion. But anyway, joining me to talk about my number four favorite episode of the original series, of course, my good friends and sister, Alyssa. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me once again. It's been a really fun journey to go through your top 25, finally getting close to the top. And I'm going to kind of spoil the question you were going to ask at the end. But this was my number one. So we're at your number four. So I'm super excited. I just did a full deep dive on it 1 year ago, actually, December of 2023. But I'm happy to revisit it again with you all.
Cool. And also joining us, he'll probably show off his nice, cool Star Trek t shirt. It's Darrin from D's Reviews.
Yes, indeed. I've got my original series T-shirt. Yeah. I am so stoked to jump in and talk about this again. I have to agree. I think most people do consider this to be the best original series episode. Getting a chance to rewatch it again, there is so much that is done right in this episode. It is really just excellent storytelling from beginning to end. Very tight, very cool. We'll get into it more, of course. And yeah, of course, you prefer season one. It's your long-standing hate for Chekhov, Mark, that I think keeps you from having to love any of the other seasons. That's how I knew this. This was like season one. As soon as I threw it in, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, because Chekhov doesn't come in until season two.
Absolutely. I just hate Chekhov. No, I just think the show is better. I'm one of those. I had this weird opinion that I know nobody agrees with me on, that I actually like season three better than season two. I just don't like season two. I mean, there's some good episodes in season two, like Mirror Mirror and Doomsday Machine, The Changeling, but season two has too many of let's go to this planet in the far side of the galaxy that's exactly like Earth. And that kind of irritates.
Yeah, but it's still way, way, way better than the worst season and one of the worst seasons in Star Trek history, which was season three by far. But we don't need to get into. I guess we don't need to get in that argument. It's like it's not even close. I don't care about the going to Earth. The first 10 episodes of season two are actually really strong. It's just the end of it kind of gets iffy, but season three, almost the entire thing is garbage. It's just complete garbage.
Yeah, where is the Yangs and the Kongs?
That's season two.
That is season two. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a bad episode. But season one is better than both season two.
Yes. That's something
I think we can agree on.
Yes. I know that that's why I say it's an opinion that I don't know anyone else has, but I do like season three better.
I mean, season three, you talked about the stretch of Doom and Enterprise, the end of season three, with the exception of the Cloud Miners. Somehow they accidentally threw a decent episode into the middle of it, but that ending part is the worst stretch of Star Trek, arguably worse than Enterprise, or just in that same territory. You've got the hippie episode. Why I'm blanking on the name of it.
Way to Eden.
Way to Eden. You got Savage Curtain. You got. I mean, it's just like one horrible episode after the other. It's just terrible.
So the way I look at the end of season 3 is good episode, bad episode, good episode, bad episode, because you had Cloud Miners and then Way to Eden. Then you had Requiem for Methuselah, which I thought was a good episode. Then you have the Lincoln in space. And then you have All Our Yesterdays, which I love, one of my favorite of the show. And then you got Turnabout. So I see boom, 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 boom. But anyway.
All Our Yesterdays is not a very good episode. But
I love it. And my viewers agree with me.
But
anyway.
But season 2 is Private Little War, right? Where you're getting serpents for the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
Line still sticks in my head though, so good or bad, it is memorable.
I know I have a higher opinion on a lot of these season 3 episodes than you do in particular, but and maybe I have a lower opinion on some of these season 2 episodes.
And also, you have a higher opinion of Spock's Reign, which is one of the worst episodes.
Yeah. I still don't like it, to be clear. I still don't like it.
But I mean, that's how season 3 starts. One of the worst episodes. So much so that Leonard Nimoy was embarrassed by this episode. That it's one of the worst episodes ever created, and that's how season 3 starts. It's just not even close. I'm sorry, it's not even close.
Well, if you go by production, and season 2 starts with Cat's Paw, which I think is worse than Spock's Brain, personally. But anyway, we can go back and forth on this, but I think.
But we're talking about the best right now,
not the worst. Anyway, we both agree season 1's the best. So, yeah. So overall thoughts on the episode, obviously, classic. I think, I do wonder, and I was thinking about this while I was watching it, if I would have loved this episode as much as I do if it came out in 2020 or 2022 or something like that. And maybe not, but it didn't come out in 2022. It would have been different if it did. And it sort of, what is it called? Blaze the trails. It's a trailblazer and sort of defined what science fiction is. And a lot of time travel in particular was kind of inspired by this episode. Now, granted, this episode was inspired by, short stories and science fiction novels and stuff like that, but it was definitely one of the first to bring it to the mainstream, and it did it in such a powerful, because the original series, speaking of bad episodes from the original series, they did time travel before this. They did that Tomorrow is Yesterday, which I didn't like that episode. I know some people think it's okay. And yeah, that was a very, at best, mediocre time travel episode. So it's not like just because you're doing time travel, it's going to be amazing. So it's to this episode in particular that hit the right chord, that hit a very classic, very sort of universal feeling of this dilemma. Let the person you love die or have history be totally undone, and Hitler wins. And so that is like a very good dilemma. And the way that they do it is just amazing. Like the way, like this is one of the few episodes where William Shatner actually gives a really good performance, an amazing performance. And that alone makes it a standout. And also it's one of the Kirk romances that actually feels like a romance. It actually feels natural. It doesn't feel ham-fisted and just every single woman who meets Kirk has to like fall in love with him in the first 5 seconds. And yeah, the camaraderie between him and Spock was really strong in this episode. And it's not alone in that, but still it's another bonus. So yeah, to me, this has always been classic staple of the entire Star Trek franchise. So yeah, one of my favorites. So we'll kick it over to you, Darrin. Your overall thoughts on the episode.
Yeah, like I said, just getting the chance to rewatch it is I am so incredibly impressed with how tight this episode is. I mean, the pedigree is awesome. You have written by Harlan Ellison, which is already impressive. I mean, he did a lot of short stories, did a lot of TV work. He'd done like Outer Limits, I think he works on as well as like what was it, the Alfred Hitchcock, I think he did an episode of that. I mean, so he's just a prolific writer. um but this is definitely, I think, I mean, honestly, it's one of the things that he's best known for as well. But you're right, and Shatner's performance in this, you have Joan Collins, who is just amazing throughout the entire episode, and Spock giving an incredible, great supportive job. I mean, Alyssa's got right here, which we'll talk about when we get there. Just how he delivers that line as an illogical, as a logical man, but still filled with so much emotion and pathos and everything. It's just, it's beautiful. There's not really any wasted time in this episode as well. They, quickly go over things that aren't too important. Hey, we figured this out, and so now we're going to go and do this, and then they do that. Um, there's not a lot of in between wasted episodes. Everything either plays towards plot or plays towards character or builds the stakes that the episode sets itself so well on. And yeah, it was like the basis of time travel through Star Trek. This is how everything works in Star Trek, about changing the past and how that alters the future and all that, the singular kind of timeline, which is kind of the rule of Star Trek going forward. So yeah, it's just, there's a reason why it's most people's number one. It's a reason why it's your favorite original series episode. There's a reason why it's my favorite episode, original series episode. There's a reason why it's Alyssa's favorite. It's because it does everything right, and does it simply so that the audience can understand these kind of more complex issues.
Yeah, this is, as I said, my number one favorite Star Trek episode of all time. Of all the Star Trek, a lot of that has to do with nostalgia. It's the first episode that really introduced me to time travel, and the guard. I was just captivated by the Guardian of Forever as a kid, but just even as an adult, rewatching it, it's just this. I've in a lot of ways appreciated it more as an adult. And I think the single greatest feat that this episode accomplishes, and you both have touched on this already, is it somehow managed to make William Shatner into a good actor. Because if you know how I feel about William Shatner, I think he sucks as an actor. I think he's terrible. He's just from that old school style of overacting, and he's just always come across with somebody with a big ego, low skill level in acting, and just over the top. And I've never liked him, but this episode, I love his performance. I think you can, in part, probably give credit to Joan Collins, who is an amazing actress, and she's amazing in this role, and how he's able to play off her. I would have to probably give a lot of credit to the director as well. I forget who directed this one. I'm forgetting off the top.
Oh no, I don't know who that
I remember
was.
because I remember talking about it when I did my video. Who directed it?
Jeez.
And, did an excellent job. I think you got to give credit to the director as well, making William Shatner into a good actor, because he would never duplicate this performance ever again. And one of the other big complaints that I've had about Star Trek, especially season 3. Sorry to bring that up again, but season 3, bad romance, bad romance, bad romance, bad romance, bad romance, bad romance. I think season 3 is the worst on that. But all throughout the original series, there were just these bad romance of the week stories where, and sometimes it wasn't Kirk. Sometimes in season 2 and 3 we get Chekhov a little bit. Dr. McCoy gets one or two. Spock gets some. Scotty's the worst, but the couple that he gets, the writers of Star Trek did not know how to write romances. They just do this romance of the week where we were expected to believe that we are told that two characters are falling madly in love, and we're not shown that. What we see is basically Captain Kirk went and boned some woman, and then they play it off like they're like madly, deeply in love, and that's not what I see. I see Captain Kirk just trying to get laid, and they're trying to present it as some kind of deep love, which it is clearly not, and that kind of thing drives me up the wall. But this episode is the one episode in the original series where they really sell it, and it has a lot to do with the chemistry between the two of them, between Joan Collins and William Shatner, and those two characters just clicks. But you feel it. You feel that these are characters who have fallen for each other deeply in a very short period of time. And I really feel like it pulls it off like no other Star Trek original series episode is able to do. And then to tie it all together with the most tragic of endings and Kirk having to make the most tragic of decisions. And that ending works because the romance works, because the chemistry between these two characters just works. And there's no other original series episode. And maybe I can't even think off the top of my head any other Star Trek episode in general that really pulls this off the way that this episode does. And I could go on and on, but we'll talk more about other things as we get into it.
Yeah, another area we have total agreement on is William Shatner. Anyone who watched my coverage of the original series, I'm sure got sick of me complaining about week to week. I'm like, God, William Shatner is such a terrible actor. He's so bad. And so it's very rare. Like, I didn't realize like how bad he was until I actually analyzed every episode of the original series. I'm like, oh my God, how can people think he's a good actor? Anyway,
Mark,
It was just a job.
Go actor.
I watched this one podcast where they're like, oh yeah, those comedians who do those impersonations of William Shatner, that's totally off. I'm like, no, it's like spot on. You watch the original series, it's like Dr. McCoy is right. Like he just does that pausing. It's like it's spot on.
He pauses for no reason whatsoever. What was that comedian who did that?
Oh yeah, no, I was trying to think of him.
Kevin something maybe?
Kevin Pollak.
Kevin Pollak, yeah, he did
Yeah,
that
that's
way back in the day. Like he pauses for no reason whatsoever.
It's dramatic tension coming to you unexpectedly.
All right,
Yeah.
so I did want to say hello to everyone in the chat dropping in. We had Stephen, Brandon, Jordan, Norman, and Rob. Hey, how's it going? So I did want to address a few things in the chat. Let's see, Jordan was saying, Mark, love your revisit of Sub Rosa. Just wondering if you brought your Scottish bagpipes to the live stream. No, not for this one. Because dinner I go to the hoose. Anyway, talking about a bad episode. Anyway, also Rob saying, I'm curious about this one because South Park has an episode called The Same Name and parodies Star Trek. Really? I have not heard of this. I'll have to check out this South Park episode. I know they did a parody of Mirror Mirror before with like the evil Cartman who turned out to be very nice, but he had a goatee or something. But I didn't hear about them parodying this episode. So I wonder what they did with it. And Stephen Kennedy saying, I know I will get hate for this. City on the Edge Forever wouldn't make my top 100 of the franchise. 8 out of 10. Well, everyone has their unpopular opinions, so that's all good. No hate here. And also,
I'm right to be wrong. That's fine.
I wasn't going to say it, but I was thinking.
I'm kidding. It's fun to say that when I disagree with somebody.
And Stephen Kennedy also pointing out Joseph Pevney as the director of the episode.
Thank you, Stephen Kennedy. I forgive you for being wrong. For giving me the director's name because I was trying to remember it. Yes, that is correct.
All right, so Darrin did already mention the writer Harlan Ellison, which is I did want to talk about him for a bit because he was a bit of a curmudgeon. A lot of people were talking about how he was very grumpy and didn't get along with people very well. And he was did some research on him. He was kind of interesting. He's been known to sue a lot of people over plagiarism, and some of the cases are kind of dubious. And it doesn't seem like he did it for like money. It seems like he really believed that people were plagiarizing him a lot, because one time he sued Marvel, and Marvel came to a settlement where the only thing that he asked for was a lifetime subscription to Marvel because he was a fan of Marvel comics, and that's all he wanted.
Did he have a particular title, or was it just every Marvel comic?
No, there was one in particular, but I can't remember what it was.
All right,
yeah,
sure. Was just curious. I'm like, what? Like all the Marvel? That's a big ask, but okay. Good.
Oh no, for the subscription, yeah, he wanted all Marvel. But I think that's still cheaper than giving him millions of dollars or whatever. And he also famously sued the studio that made The Terminator, because said that plagiarized an episode of The Outer Limits. Oh, I was trying to remember the name of the episode. I actually watched like a detailed video on that episode to see. Oh, Soldier, that was the name of it. And I wanted to see how much it actually ripped off the Terminator, and not much. It seems to me it's the same sort of similarities you find in all sorts of science fiction. Like, I think Deep Space Nine episode The Siege of 558 rips off Saving Private Ryan more than the Terminator rips off Soldier, but that's just my humble opinion. But apparently it's said that they settled out of court because the studio just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But James Cameron was on the record saying he was against the settlement because he said the whole lawsuit was complete and utter bullshit. Anyway, sorry. This is all building towards the thing I wanted to discuss, which is his original script for this episode was kind of different. And he wrote it as a novel. Some people read it. I didn't actually read it, but I heard detailed descriptions on it saying that originally it wasn't McCoy getting drugged up and going through the Guardian Forever. It was this guy who was a outlaw on the Enterprise, who was a drug dealer who was selling drugs, and Kirk and Spock were trying to hunt him down, and he escaped into the past. And the script has them finding him, bringing him back to the ship, and executing him. And Harlan Ellison was outraged that they changed his script. So I heard the story where there was a award ceremony where he was receiving an award for his script that he wrote for this episode for City on the Edge, and Gene Roddenberry, Gene Kuhn, a lot of the big wigs from Star Trek showed up to support him, to be like, oh, great job. And he went out there and gave a speech about don't let them change you, and like pointed to the people who were there to support them and started like yelling at them for changing his script and saying, don't let Hollywood change your ideas. And the thing is, I agree with what they did to his script. I think his original script doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit into Star Trek. Like, if you make a generic sci-fi, okay, but a drug dealer on the Enterprise, like, I don't know. That just doesn't buy it. And Kirk and Spock executing him? Oh, come on. He didn't go to that planet with the Telosians, so he doesn't deserve an execution. So that's the only reason Starfleet will execute you. But anyway, like, I think this guy, I mean, he's obviously a good sci-fi writer. Darrin mentioned earlier some of his works, but yeah, he's definitely a curmudgeon, and he definitely was an asshole for calling out the people who were there to support him. And this is one case where I think Gene Roddenberry, Gene Kuhn were 100% correct. They knew Star Trek. They knew how to make it a better episode. And I think they turned it into a much, much better episode. Anyway, I just want to throw out that story. Alyssa, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't have much to add. I totally agree with you that they did make it into a better episode, and because they know Star Trek and they know the characters. Executing someone, I mean, I know they hadn't really fully established like what the Federation is and what Starfleet is and like what the rules are and things. But executing even then, I think would have been a little bit extreme. You're right; they didn't go to Talaspor. I mean, that's what you can execute it for. But yeah, and I don't know. I was never clear on how much of the Joan Collins story or the Edith Keeler story was in the original script. But I mean, that's what makes this episode. So if that wasn't there, then they made it a way better episode.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. It reminds me a bit of the was it yesterday's Enterprise? I think also went through kind of an interesting journey between its original concept and the ideas and bringing Tasha Yar back and things that ended up coalescing into a story that had its maybe original idea with somebody else's, writing, but turned into its own thing, which became much better than what the original idea proposed. I didn't do much looking into Harlan Ellison. He's, like I said, I know he's a very prolific writer, but F him, because no, you don't do that. And this is one of those better changes. Alyssa's right. The Edith Keeler connection is what really drives it, that this becomes really such a personal story as opposed to just like some let's go through time and get them. That's what makes everything so powerful in with this. Again, it's a simple human story inside of a fantastical envelope. And I think that's really what sort of makes this work. And it's what they keep the best focus on throughout this. And you're right, it's totally the chemistry between these two performers that make this between Collins and Shatner that really kind of sell that romance, because I think they do kind of ultimately start chasing this kind of energy throughout the rest with all the other instant romances Alyssa was referring to, where look, soft lighting and that soft focus does a whole lot of work to just convey like, oh look, this person's fallen in love.
And the music, they always went like, the soft lighting, and they do that music.
Yeah.
And like, I'm supposed to buy that there's a romance, but
what you just re-edit whenever they do that, you just put a little like Cupid flyby and just shoot an arrow, and it's like that just explains it. The love. Let's move on.
But I remember when I did my review for this episode last year that I mentioned the music that they do. They don't use that cheesy love song theme that they always use. They use a different theme when they show Joan Collins, and it's not as memorable. Like I couldn't like hum it for you right now, but I do remember that it was like perfect. It was like it is a much better. Like it's more grounded. It's not over the top cheesy sounding like the other. Like
no, definitely.
Like it's more believable, and maybe it's not as I don't remember it the same way. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as catchy.
Catchy, yeah.
Yeah, but it worked so much better.
Yeah, I just watched the episode moments ago, so I still have that music in my head. But yeah, I think I agree. It's not as catchy, but it's also not as cheesy, and it works. Yeah, it works beautiful for the episode. Absolutely.
So what we're saying is hats off to the uncredited staff writers that cleaned this sucker up and made it what it is. Because we have no idea who we are. I mean, again, there's probably a book, not the one by Harlan Ellison, I'm sure.
No, I know I think it was Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn, who specifically rewrote the episode. Gene Roddenberry was infamous for rewriting people's works without giving them credit or with, doing it behind their backs. And sometimes it was quite shady, particularly when we get to season 1 of TNG. He would rewrite scripts to add Wesley to it more. So, but sometimes I actually agree with Roddenberry's changes because he knows Star Trek, at least. And I think particularly it was true for the original series, especially Gene Kuhn.
Well, Roddenberry was almost exclusively responsible for all those like parallel Earth stories that you were telling me.
Yes, that is true.
So it kind of goes off the deep end in season 2, but yeah.
I don't think he's a good writer, but he does.
Yeah.
I think sometimes he's good at rewriting people.
Yeah.
But because he also wrote Turnabout Intruder, which is, I think, the worst original series episode. But anywho, so I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this name in the chat. But they're saying that it was actually 2 Outer Limits episodes that Ellison said were plagiarized. Second episode was Demon and with the glass hand. Oh, was that? They're saying they were both plagiarized by Terminator. Or was that a different case? Because I know he had like many plagiarism lawsuits, but I didn't know if it was both. Maybe the two of them combined made Terminator. I don't know. But I believe James Cameron when he said that, and that was total bullshit, that he hadn't even heard of that episode when he wrote Terminator. But anyway, it's just some people have similar ideas in sci-fi. It happens. But anywho, so let's go ahead and jump into the episode proper. Let's start out by talking about the Guardian of Forever and how this is something that definitely captivated my imagination as a child, and I was a teenager, I should say, by the time I saw this episode. But still, I was completely fascinated by this concept of a sentient portal that can take people back to any time period, and I used to be quite angry that they didn't show it again or more often. I mean, doesn't appear proper in canon until Discovery, unless you count the animated series as canon, which I don't. It's kind of semi-canon. But if you count that, then it appeared in that. But and there was a couple of non-canon novels and whatnot that it appeared in. But after seeing those other non-canon appearances, I'm like, no, maybe it's probably for the best that they didn't show it again. I think it does because it works so well in this episode, but I think it's one of those ideas that seem fascinating because it's mysterious. I think if you go into the details of it, it would probably get less interesting. And if people used it to travel back all willy-nilly, seems like because this episode proved anything, it proved that it's fucking dangerous. Like, they changed the whole history and erased Starfleet like that for one misuse. So if anything, it should be off limits. And I think one of this didn't in Mzadi, that Star Trek novel, I think it was like quarantine and considered like off limits.
Yeah, I think so.
I would imagine so. Yeah, that's.
And of course, it's the original series is made in the 60s, so you had to allow for the "I am the Guardian of Forever" voice that it has, which is very typical of the 60s. But you have to make that allowment.
Like, why was there steam?
And I was thinking too logically when I was watching this just now, because it was like, the Spock recorded of the time period and it repeated itself some, like, so it's only showing Earth history. Like, does it sense, oh, these are humans, so I'll show them their history, even though there is a Vulcan amongst them? Like, if there were different aliens, would it show them their history? I guess.
I would assume so. I think
Yeah, it's just what it offered. Hey, humans, look what I can do. I can throw it into your past, completely alter your history. Want to roll the dice?
And it seems like to just be showing like news clips and stuff. Like, I don't know, but because if it was really going centuries fast, like, you wouldn't be able to see anything. It would just be like a blur. But I don't know if you'll agree or disagree with me on this, but I was thinking of when Kirk and Spock traveled back to the 30s, and Spock said something like, oh, there's the theory that time is fluid like a river with eddies and whatever, and if that theory is true, it's going to lead us to McCoy. And I was thinking about it. I was like, that theory makes no sense. Like, I don't, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, that time is a river. Like, what you mean, time travel? Like, I don't get it. Like, is he saying like is this like a lost style destiny or something, that they're meant to be in the same place. Like, I don't know. Do you think that makes sense?
Well, I've heard the time is a river thing before. It's not just from this episode. That is a legitimate theory. And I'm not sure that I understand it. I did more associate it with the whatever happened kind of time travel, that more fatalistic style of time travel. So I don't know. It was just a way for them to explain how they found McCoy. I mean, so I wasn't too much into it because just like they have to have some kind of explanation.
Yeah, well, to me, this is what I thought. To me, there was just some fancy way of saying plot convenience. Like,
yeah,
we needed for the plot to happen. Just go with it.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's what it is. Yeah,
I think the time is the river theory. Like, if there's a legitimate theory out there, I'd be interested in hearing it. But I think how it was described by Spock in this episode didn't make any sense to me. It felt like it's just a big excuse for plot convenience.
Oh, it was a big excuse for plot.
Oh yeah, totally.
You just gotta deal with it. Just not
We're gonna hand wave something the audience will get to be like, oh, there are points and rivers, and we're all swept to the same place, like the beach.
But I am willing to just go with it because this episode's so awesome. But I was just pointing that out.
I mean, the other thing that you could say is that there are definitive points in history that have to occur in a certain way, and the points in between are somewhat less important. So if one of those points got changed or altered, that would have a certain time and gravity to it. See, I can make up stuff too. It sounds really fancy. But no, seriously, it's an idea, but what the hell do any of us know?
I think it might make sense if that's the way time travel works. That's the way that the Guardian works, that it leads them to where they need to go, but not like time in general. Like that's, I don't know.
Oh, sure.
Anyway.
I hear you.
Anyway, Darrin, let's start with your thoughts on the Guardian of Forever.
Well, the Guardian is the reason why my voiceover career isn't working, because I was trained with doing everything big and bold into the mic. And they're not into that these days. I'm cursed. No, the Guardian.
All right, Darrin, you need to go to the Guardian of Forever, travel back in time to the 60s, and then you can have a career doing the voiceover.
And alter everything. Cell phones will never look the same way again. But yeah, and you're right. I mean, it is one of those very cool things. It's the booming voice. It can kind of take you anywhere. Yeah, I think it was just showing Earth because it was like, hey, check this out, I can show your planet. And then somebody jumped in. It was like, well, I guess we got to figure out how to fix that one. But it's also, to me, one of the reasons why at the end it's so haunting when he's like, hey, there's lots of places we could go, I could be your guide, check this out. It's like, dude, we all just erased our entire history, and you're treating this like, hey, did you have fun? Want to go for another one? Come on. Who knows what'll happen this time? So it's it's an incredibly dangerous thing. And yeah, you would imagine that they would immediately put up the Telosian warning beacons, like, also here, don't ever go here. Especially Klingons, Romulans, guys that don't like us, never come here. And go save Edith Keeler's life. That would ruin everything.
So that could be the second death penalty if you travel.
Yeah, exactly. But that's also one of the reasons why you can't really ever come back here from just a storytelling standpoint. Is this is the drama of it, and this is the danger of it, and this illustrates that so well that you could never risk doing this again. So but yeah, but also giant archway that talks and flashes and has dropping mist that travels you in time. Yeah, perfect design too. I mean, this is like Star Trek in an image.
I was just thinking the animated series in that episode, the historians were just using it willy-nilly to travel back in time and study the past. Just willy-nilly. But yeah, that's why it's not canon. Anyway, Alyssa, your thoughts?
Yeah, and then in Discovery, and I know we have mixed opinions on that, but they did say that the reason the Guardian Forever moved because it was being abused in the temporal or the temporal wars, which I love how they tied it into the temporal wars that it would be abused. I think that's like the one time in Star Trek where they did mention like yeah it was being abused. I think in the first season, the original series, they weren't thinking much about Star Trek as the greater universe and the greater galaxy and the Federation. And like, it didn't become an expansive Star Trek universe until later. So they weren't thinking about, oh, there's going to be other Federation ships that like might like stumble upon this planet and it might not be the best idea or whatever. It's just like the episode's over and this is gone now. We're just going to move on to the next thing. But yeah, but the Guardian of Forever, I like I said at the top, it's like it really captured my imagination when I was a kid. I did watch it when I was a little kid, um, and just the whole mystique about it. And I make fun of the sound effects now, but at the when I saw it, it just adds to the mystique and the mystery of it. That just made it so fascinating. Like the and also if you listen closely, has the same noise that they have using the cage, the like the flowers supposedly singing. It's like woo, which I always thought was like similar to the transporter sound, but it's just constant. Um, that they had in the cage, and they said that like the plants or whatever made that noise or whatever. That's also in the background with the woo. And it seems cheesy now, but it actually really was effective and just adding to the intrigue, the mystery, the mystique of this all powerful being that we don't know what it is. It's an arch that talks to you in that big booming voice. So yeah, even though I can look at it now and see it as a little 1960s ish, I still think it was a very effective character, if you want to call it, plot device, what have you.
No, and I do totally agree that the Discovery saying that it was being abused during the Temple Wars makes total sense, and that that's why it moved. But yeah, it is. I do like how they tied those things together. But
it was really the lottery craze of 2295 where people kept going and back to get the lottery winning lottery tickets. And some sports almanac was involved somewhere, I think.
But you know what? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Oh, I was going to go off on a tangent, so maybe you should go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say that judging just by this episode itself, I think because if you look around the area around the Guardian, it's like ruins. So I always got the implication, and this might not be true, maybe they're just trying to say it's an ancient civilization, but I always got the impression that they kind of destroyed themselves because of it.
Oh, I never necessarily got that impression. I just kind of thought it was ancient, but that's totally a valid interpretation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, finding anything in ruins, and it's like, I have always been here. I will always be here. I was before it all. It's like, okay, well, didn't really work out for these people. Would you like to jump back in time and try and fix it? Come on, roll those dice. Yeah.
All right, so let's jump to them going to the 1930s. This whole setting of finding themselves fish out of water in the past. At the start, Norman made a comment saying that the guy from the 30s that appeared to beam somewhere, he should have appeared with Kira and O'Brien when they were in the 30s in the past tense. But I'm not sure which guy that he's referring to that beamed somewhere.
Is he talking about the guy who shot himself with a phaser?
Yeah, that's the only one I'm thinking of where he's vaporized. Like he just vaporized himself.
Yeah.
But that would have been cool if he actually beamed somewhere.
Yeah,
but that did make me think, because I was trying to think that there was this boxing poster in the background, and when Kirk and Spock appeared, and I was like, oh, I could have sworn that appeared in some other Star Trek episode as an Easter egg, and I was trying to think of it and I couldn't, but then that was jogged my memory. It was past tense. Even though I heard somewhere that they had that same poster in the background.
Oh, interesting.
When they showed up in the 30s.
Yeah. No, I always thought. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The guy who vaporized himself. I think I may have said this in my review, but like, what if he had been somebody important? I guess he was just some homeless guy that didn't amount to anything and didn't have any kids. But like, what if that was what changed the past? The homeless guy was going to prevent World War III, and now he's gone. And
that was actually Thaddeus Musk, grandfather of Elon Musk, who never existed in this universe, which you can see is the simple point between that and the Terran universe, which we know from Discovery. He was on that Earth, so
Yeah. Yes. So we're living in the mirror universe, is what you're saying. Okay.
Well, we are in the darkest timeline, folks. I mean, come on, let's be honest.
Certainly appears that way. Anyway, so yeah, and I'll have to own up to a mistake that I've made about this episode for decades, for the longest time. I thought that this took place in San Francisco just because every other Star Trek thing in the past takes place in San Francisco. And I mentioned that in my review. And I was like, it's New York. Don't you recognize the Brooklyn Bridge? And I'm like, no, I have no idea what the Brooklyn Bridge looks like. I've never been there, but I don't know. But yeah, no, it's actually, so it is New York, and past tense was San Francisco. So there's the same, same boxing match. I guess maybe it was on TV. I don't know. But anyway, so some of the fish out of the water stuff, like I think the scene with the cop is definitely the weak point of the episode. It's probably my least favorite scene with Kirk. Oh, he got his head caught in the mechanical rice picker. And so, yeah, it's could have done without that scene, but it doesn't ruin the episode. But it's definitely like, but I do love how they didn't take too long to do that. Oh, we're from the future trying to make excuses and whatnot. That they just did that one scene and then moved on. And yeah, other than that, I think it was interesting that they didn't travel to present day for them, the 60s. I think that was a good touch, but they wanted to have obviously for the whole World War II thing, it had to take place before then, but also have the Depression as the setting was also sort of prominent. So yeah, overall, like the setting. Alyssa, any thoughts on the setting?
Yeah, I have. I do like the setting. I think, yes, it does have to be in the 30s in order to set up for World War II. I do want to touch on the cop scene because that also was my least favorite scene by a lot. And it doesn't ruin the episode because it is my number one of Star Trek. But it is, I did talk about this in my review. There is a line that I wish they would delete in present versions of it if they were going to have it on DVD, Blu-ray, whatever, or have it on streaming services. I think that they could eliminate the line, not just the rice picker, but Kirk says, "Oh, clearly he's Chinese," which is racist as fuck. And I kind of forgive them because it was the 60s. Like they just shit like that was commonplace. That's not something people were thinking of. It was not, I mean, we weren't woke or whatever back then, that this was not a thing that people were considering. And then you had the whole Jerry Lee Lewis and all that. There was just crazy racism against Asians and all over all the films and television. So in context, like understand why it happened. Now I think we could remove that and we can take that line out, and I don't think it loses anything. I wish we could take the whole scene out, but unfortunately it does kind of bleed into when Kirk and Spock meet Edith Killer and they have just run from the cop. So you have to have it there in order for that to make sense. But otherwise, I would take out the whole scene because the whole scene is just dumb. It's they've played for comedy, and there is a lot of great comedy in this episode, which is an underrated part of it, and a lot of great chemistry between Kirk and Spock. But this is the one scene where they fall short on that, where they're trying for comedy, trying for the chemistry, and I think it's like really stupid. And like I would wipe out that whole scene if you could, but you do need the cop scene in there to explain how Kirk and Spock end up with Edith Keeler, and they say they're running from the cop and all that. But at the very least, I would take out the racist line. But I struggled with like making this my number one greatest Star Trek episode with a really blatantly racist line in it, and came to the conclusion it was the 60s. It was the 60s, and there was one line that had no overall effect on the plot. Like I use the example of Code of Honor, which if you there was like the racism is like intrinsic to the plot, that if you take out the racism, there's no episode. You just get rid of the whole episode. Whereas you take out the racism here, the episode remains as strong as it ever was because it's not an intrinsic part of the plot. But the line still bothers me. So, and ultimately, I'm just like, man, it was the 60s. What are you going to do?
See, nowadays they could do the ultimate in-joke and have him just say, obviously my friend is Ukrainian, which is where his Nimoy's family is from. So, but yeah, not that clever back there in the 60s. Everyone would be like, I don't get it. What's a Ukrainian? By how most Americans would probably say. Actually, while we get into the travel to 60s, I did want to make a note on just how cleanly and quickly they get to that point. Even with the setup, when the episode starts, is we're hitting time quakes. We've been following this thing. Send Starfleet my personal logs about what we found. Then we have Sulo injured. We get McCoy popping up with a brief little comment by Shatner about, oh, is that going to be safe? And a little wisecracky thing back from McCoy. But that gives us our basic Chekhov's gun for this scene, so that when the next big thing goes and he injects himself, it moves everything on. But it's like, that's all very quick. I mean, they get to the episode, they get to the back in time very quickly. Even the stuff on the planet's surface is like, hey, here's a thing, necessary science background. McCoy jumps through, and then, well, they even do the bit where, oh, we've already figured out there's something has changed. We're going to do this and we're going to move on. It's like they really keep the episode going with its pacing to get to this point, to make the most out of this time. And it's a long episode. It's like 50 minutes, which is another 6 minutes longer than most of your standard network shows today. So they get that extra time to really kind of squeeze in storytelling, and they really make the most out of it. And yeah, the police bit is kind of, a little racist and a little cheesy, but it's still Star Trek. They still have that kind of feel and flavor for what the audiences wanted at the time, but they don't spend a lot of time on it. Again, they do this thing and then boom, they're in Edith Keeler's basement and the real, chunk of the episode begins. So just a really efficient way to set everything up and get things moving. And to get the most into the story. They do a great job with that.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. Was why I can still call this my favorite Star Trek episode, even with that one scene that I hate, because it doesn't last long. They go through it quickly. It's in the past. You're done with it. It doesn't have any more further effect on the episode, and the episode moves on to get to the good stuff. So they do an excellent job of that. I agree.
Yeah, and I think like the fast pace is done in a way where it's doesn't feel like it's too fast. Like it feels like completely earned. Like they spend.
Well, yeah, nothing's rushed. They just only focus on the things that are important. Yeah,
like the part where like when the Guardian says a whole history has been changed or whatever, and they have that scene where Kirk looks up to the stars and like, oh my god, we're trapped here. Like, yeah, we needed that to emphasize just how fucked they are, but they didn't dwell on it. They didn't spend too much time. They just hit it and moved on.
Well, yeah, it was. We can't find anything. What they don't spend the extra 5-10 minutes, which is where I think where some of the modern storytelling kind of steps back. Not to belabor the point, is sometimes, and I know we'll definitely talk about this at the end, where there's always a scene where, oh my god, what are we doing? My friends, they're gone. But Captain, I don't know if we're going to be able to make it anymore. Don't worry. Have you tried? Yes, it's been 20 minutes. I can't get a hold. It's like they don't bother with any of that. They move.
Yeah.
They make a comment and move on. And I think it really is to this story's benefit.
Although they do have another scene that bothers me slightly, but again, I wave my hands because it's the 60s. In that little bit that you're talking about, where and they did this a lot with Uhura, where her whole personality is like, Captain, I'm scared.
Yeah, that's
right. I'm a frail woman on this starship, and I'm scared. Please save me, oh Captain, my big strong man. And like, but that was, again, it's like they did it once. They moved past it. They get over it, and that's like a thing. It's the 60s.
Yeah, they restricted to one line and then move on. But no, I completely agree. That is, it's like, okay, thanks, Uhura. This is why we've put you here. Okay, very good.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was also very common in the original series. That constantly have the women character, whenever they speak, they have to be like, "Oh, I'm so scared." It's but yeah, as you say, they move past it very quickly as well.
And the soft focus and the eye light that just lights up the eye.
But I did like the way they portrayed Edith Keeler. Again, a very strong actress with Joan Collins. And it's interesting the way they introduced her, because this is something I kind of noticed for the first time today when I was watching this episode, is that, she does the whole bit about, a lie is the, cruel way to say hello. It's not cold outside. And then she asks for their names. And when Edith asks him who Spock is, he hesitates. And what I kind of thought about for the first time today is that he's contemplating whether or not to make up a name for him, but instead says Spock. And what I noticed is that after she said the thing about a lie, everything he said to her was the truth. Like, he didn't lie. So I think that was a very conscious effort on his part, because I think he knows that she would be smart enough to detect a lie, even if it was something, his minor saying, oh, his name's Mickey or something. Like, I think even that I think he thought that she could read him that well.
Well, and he didn't want to insult her intelligence. Like, he picked up right away that she's smart. And like, if I say his name is Mickey or whatever, that's an insult to her intelligence. She's never going to buy that. So he instantly, I think, respected her.
Yeah, and that is a small nuance I never noticed. But yeah, and then I will say that the speech that she gives, like, taken on its own out of context, this isn't a space show about time travel, doesn't really make any sense. Like, it's not that good of a speech, and why would she be saying that at a soup kitchen? But whatever, it does. They need to get on with this, and they need to, show us what kind of person she is, and that she's, looking to the bright future, and that she would be attracted to Kirk in that way because he represents that bright future, and she can kind of sense that. So it gets the point across. And I do like the scene with that, that guy complaining about her and Kirk being like, shut up, because it shows that he really wants to listen to her.
Well, I also got that he was making a very crude reference and was continuing to do so, and he was shutting her down immediately right there. But no, they do a great job of establishing their character and their connection and why they are, because of that honesty. she can denote a lie very quickly, and he makes the choice to be honest with her, and that pays off immediately, and suddenly there is this connection, this realization, this trust. And you're right, I think it's not only, as Alyssa said, is she smart and perceptive and everything, she continues to reinforce that even later on when she's talking about Spock and like, there he is, always by your side where he always should be. I'm still trying to figure out, but it's like she sees the truth. And I think that reinforces more when he hears the speech. It might be out of context, but is like, this is someone who that Kirk can connect with emotionally, that has the same vision, that has the same belief, and she's right. He's back in time, and here's somebody in the middle of the Depression who is living like it's the 23rd century with that belief and that aspect and that kind of connection. And I think that again further connects the two of them together. And that honesty choice at the very beginning, I think, is intrinsic to that and just reinforces why this relationship works so much more than many of the dime store ones they try to shovel in subsequent seasons.
Yeah. And yeah, I do agree the speech is it's a little over the top. But she was a little bit short of saying, and one day they're going to be traveling on a starship and it's going to be called the Enterprise and it's going to have tuna cells and a solar section. I mean, it wasn't quite, yes, there it is. It wasn't quite to that point, but it was to the point of like, okay, how would she know this? This is a little laying it on too thick. But other than that, I think they do a really great job of showing just how forward thinking she is, how perceptive, how intelligent she is, and how unique she is. And so when Kirk is smitten by her, like I buy it. Like I buy that why someone like Kirk coming from the 23rd century would be just totally smitten by this person, even if the speech was a slightly bit over the top. I do think that with everything else that they do with this character, it's really believable to me that Kirk right away would be just captivated by her, which again goes back to why I find this to be such a believable relationship. Aside from the chemistry that I talked about between the actors, I think the way that they sell her personality and her character and why Kirk would be so fascinated with her, I buy it 100%. So despite maybe that the speech is a little bit much, I still think that they do an amazing job with that.
Let's see. Norman Buckwald in the chat was adding to her speech, saying, "And there will be Kindle Ghost."
And then another time, the Enterprise will de-evolve. And, yeah.
And then someone will steal Spock's brain. Anyway, so yes, as we all mentioned already, one of the strongest aspects of the episode is definitely the romance between Kirk and Spock. Not Kirk and Spock. That's that's something else entirely.
They have great chemistry, but maybe not romance.
Yes,
that's more of a series-long story there.
Yeah, but the romance between Kirk and Edith, which, and I was trying to put my finger on it, like what makes this different, because I definitely sense that. I definitely sense it's a romance that I buy more. I mean, Alyssa earlier mentioned the cheesy music that's in other episodes that wasn't in this one, and that's part of it. And also Edith being a much stronger character, not the typical, "Ooh, Kirk, oh, you look so hot." But I think there's also something different about Kirk's character and the way he interacts. Now, I heard the opinion, I was watching this review once that gave the opinion that this is the only time in the original series that we actually see Kirk have like a real love interest. The only time that he's really in love. The rest of the times is more like a fling. And then they mention, like in the movies, there's Carol Marcus, but that's more of like a past love. And I definitely get that. And I was trying to think what it is. And I think it's because part of it, how Kirk is different, is I think in most, and how I think I could tell he's in love and not just smitten, is because in most other episodes, he's like hitting on them, like really hard out, like feeding them one-liners and be like, "Oh, you're so beautiful, you're a beauty, it's like the stars." And he doesn't do any of that. He sort of relates to her in a more like respectful manner, and sort of the flirting seems more natural, and it does seem like a deeper love. And so that is what you need to sell the ending. And that's why the ending hits as hard as it did, because if you didn't have this good writing and, dare I say, good acting, it wouldn't have hit, the ending wouldn't have hit as hard. And they sold it. Like, they did such an amazing job with the romance. So Alyssa, we'll get to you first about the
I mean, you're really hitting on what I was talking about at the beginning. Is this is the only true romance in the original series, not just with Kirk, but with any character in the original series. And a lot of it is the acting. A lot of it is what I just talked about. With you buy why Kirk would be fascinated by this person. But and a lot of it is the chemistry between the actors. But it absolutely is the only time with Captain Kirk in particular where you really feel that that he's actually in love. All the other times, as I talked about in the beginning, they're telling us and not showing us that Kirk is in love. Sometimes they're not even telling us that; they're just flat out showing it as Kirk hitting on. Sometimes he's just hitting on women to meet his own ends, and it's just flat out he's just using them. Other times the show is telling us that there's this really deep love between Kirk and this woman that we don't see. I mean, they're not showing us that there's anything there. What they're showing us is, like you said, Kirk saying, "Your eyes are like the stars," and like just these cheesy one-liners and hitting on just like flat out hitting on the girl. And then they will try to sometimes present it as it's some deep love, and that's what really rubs me the wrong way when they do that. That's why the episode, slight tangent, Deep Space Nine, Meridian, one of my least favorite episodes in Deep Space Nine and all of Star Trek, because they do the same thing with Dax and her love interest there, that they're just flat out want to fuck, and they try to present it as some deep love that is not there. And this is the only episode in the original series where they actually present this deep love, and you feel it, and you see it. I can feel it, touch it, see it, and it's just believable. And there are many reasons for that, but I think that this is absolutely the only time Captain Kirk falls in love on screen in the entire original series. And yes, you need that to sell the ending, because if you had like a Meridian type romance, the ending would be like I don't buy this. Like, it would not be. We wouldn't be having this discussion right now.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of it is really, it's the subtlety. There isn't, and maybe there's even choices that came from that initial point of like, I'm going to be honest because she's going to see through me, by the same way as I'm not going to hit on her because that would be rude. It's like Kirk takes a different approach. And in fact, even all of their dialogue, they're just conversations. He's just talking about visions of the future, and she's connecting in. There's not that flirtatious thing. There's just an honest kind of dialogue. I mean, and there's really only a handful of scenes between the two of them that we see. And I think that lets it know I think there's a lot of less is more that works here, because they don't throw it in with the dialogue. They can just have those kind of soft moments and reflections and let them think about it. And I don't know, maybe Shatner felt that this was worthy of his time and investment. Maybe it was working with Collins and the atmosphere involved that, allowed him to take a few more risks and stuff like that. But yeah, you can feel that they're falling for each other, not see that they're not hear that they're falling for each other, but we can feel it. And I think that it's a rare chemistry thing that they get. It just happens to work very beautifully here. How they did it, I don't know. Monkey paw, maybe. Somebody sold their soul. Several trips through the Guardian of Forever. I don't know how they achieved it. But they did matter. And you're right. It's because of doing this. It's the investment in this that does make the ending work. And if you don't have it, the ending is just, oh, shucks.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Darren touched on something that I realized when I did my rewatch last year, is that it is actually shocking how few scenes Kirk and the Keeler actually have together in this episode. So they just make the most out of every scene. Like every scene just hits with a big impact. That when I went and watched it again, I was like, they actually don't have all that many scenes together, or it just feels like they have more scenes together than they actually do. But just each scene is just so impactful and just hits you so hard.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I just watched this too. That I think a lot of the romance between them is implied, but they do a good job at implying it. Like I think it's also implied that a lot of time has passed. I couldn't remember what didn't Spock say they arrived like a month or something before McCoy. So
he assesses it to, he thinks it was about a week, but then they don't know when he shows up to when they were. So I get the feeling it's not a whole lot of time they actually get together. But then again, Spock does a whole lot of work that he says is going to take him weeks to do. So.
Yeah, no, I got the impression that at least like around a month had passed. And so that there's been a lot of, they're implying that Kirk and Edith were spending more time like off screen because they're off screen. But yeah. they do a good job of implying that romance, because every time they show them on screen together, that you can feel that the relationship has grown and gotten bigger. So I think it's handled brilliantly. Absolutely. It does show that you can show a deep romance even if you don't have that much time. But some of these other, like, I'm sorry, I was just thinking about one of the worst examples of a Kirk romance. In what was that episode called? The Paradise Syndrome, I believe it's called, where he gets amnesia and supposedly falls in love with a highly racist episode. He falls in love with a Native American, and she just loves him because he's a god. And he has the whole scene where it's like, "Marimani, I don't deserve this happiness." And I remember making fun of that in particular because it was so bad. Like, it was acted so bad. And then that episode, it had like a voiceover of Kirk saying, "Oh, I'm so happy." And on screen, you saw William Shatner go like, it was so terrible. And it's probably because it wasn't written as well, didn't have a good director, and Shatner wasn't feeling it. And so you get the bad.
Yeah, that episode is the anti-City on the Edge of Forever. I think that is the worst. I think that is the. Incidentally, I remember I saw on the Wikipedia page, like, it always says at the bottom of each episode, like it has the accolades, and it says this episode was named the 7th best romance in Star Trek on Screen Rant, and I'm like, I've lost all respect for Screen Rant.
Well, yeah, you should for that. There's lots of reasons, but that's definitely one of them.
Even though they did launch the career of Ryan George, but
but one thing that I think also really works. Oh, sorry, you were off there, Mark. Did you? Oh, one thing that also I think works well is they're not really intimate at any point. I think there's one point at the top of the steps where she kisses his cheek, or there's some little bit there. But their intimacy is in their closeness and conversation, in their feel with each other. And I think a lot of times you always have that soft light turn and hug, and they're making out. They're like, "Oh, it's been such a great time with you." And, again, they're showing all of that stuff, but we're not feeling any of it. And I think that it's, I don't know, it's like all of the classic will they, won't they's. In the less that we see in some ways, the more that we want to see more. And because they only have that handful of scenes, I think they make the choice to keep it emotionally strong as opposed to, physically obvious.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I believe I remember saying when I did my review that they don't actually kiss on screen. And
No, they don't. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I know she leans forward, but I think they just...
Yeah, they don't, which is incredible.
Yeah.
That they're able to like show this raw emotion, this powerful connection, and they don't need to kiss. They don't have to have Kirk just randomly, making out with some, alien woman. They don't need that. Like it's the emotional connection is just so powerful.
Well, and they can just give Shatner that moment to actually just look and have that, I'm in love, but I can't be. Or, it's like, there's that little bit that goes on. And I think, again, they can use that. And I think he had something to work with.
See, they were able to show that Shatner was happy and in love without having a voiceover telling us that, with him going oh god. But
season 3 sucks. Okay.
Yeah, well, that episode does. Anyway, yeah, so, but I did notice one time he pulled in for a kiss, but they didn't actually show it. So yeah, that was an interesting choice of them to do that. So anyway, wanted to move on to Spock building his little thingy and able to figure out what the different timelines is. And now I'm gonna have to admit something else that I've always misunderstood about the scene. I didn't realize it until today, so I feel kind of dumb. But I thought that Spock was building like something that could predict the time thing and filled it out. But now I was just realizing that he was just powering up the tricorder. That the tricorder had already recorded the passage of time from the Guardian of Forever, and it recorded it before McCoy went through and after he went through, so it had the two different things. And I never got that. I thought that and I was like, this is so fake that he can build this whole thing, that he can predict the time. They can't even do that now. But then I was like, oh, he's just like powering up the tricorder. Well, not powering up, but like interfacing with it. But I still think it's kind of fake, though. But it's not as bad as Data building. He actually did build, when he traveled back to the 18th century or the 19th century, he did build a thing that could detect time shifts or whatever. Yes, and they parried that in Lower Decks recently. But yeah. But
look, I just need 5 pounds of platinum. And I can get this working.
And Kirk wasn't even able to give him all the stuff he wanted. He's like, Mr. Spock, this bag doesn't contain platinum or what, all this other stuff, and it's not going to in the near future. But Spock still managed to do it out of stone knives and bearskins. But no. So we get the whole scene of him finding the two different things, but he wasn't. Again, it's because the tricorder wasn't powered up properly. He wasn't sure if it was before McCoy jumped in, before the timeline changed, or after, so he wasn't sure. And it was kind of good that they started the episode like that. It was, does she have to, is she going to die or is she not? Which is the future? It has that uncertain. But I think I do recall that the very first time I saw this episode, before I knew what happened at the end, that I thought, well, of course it's going to be she needs to die because that's more interesting. But it's still good to sort of have that hook. And then, of course, he eventually does find the correct information, that the whole thing with alternate history, that it allowed Germany to build the nuclear bomb first, stuff like that. Which I don't know. I part of me is not sure how I feel about the messages saying that piece was bad. But it's like what Darren's usual name. Yes, it was right, but for the wrong time, which is what they said in the episode. But still, I don't know, that whole thing didn't really sit right with me. But I just thought, hey, it's a cool way to have this alternate future and alternate history and how the timeline changed. And again, this is like a very early example, especially for me. But I think in mainstream media to have this alternate timeline, that the future could be changed, that there could be this alternate history. It was definitely the first time I was introduced to it, and I saw this episode in like the early '90s when I was 14 or 11, but something like that. Maybe it was 12. I don't know, something like that. So, but it's definitely the first time I was introduced to that kind of concept, and so yeah, I think it is definitely used very well. Well, we'll get Alyssa. We'll get you first on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the right idea at the wrong time. And I have over the years have kind of like gone back and forth and like, how do I feel about this? But I do think that it's in a show that ultimately is showing us like the utopian future where Earth is all at peace and we're all working together, all different races and genders, and going out to space together. That in the context of that's what this show is about. Ron Berry's vision and on all of that stuff. And there are episodes that have come not too long before this in air date order that very much are really hitting you with the pro-peace, anti-war message. So when you put it in that context, I'm okay with it ultimately. That I think that it is the right idea at the wrong time concept. I'm at peace with that because it is such an intriguing story that Kirk would have to choose between life or death for his lover. And as far as this being left up as, does she live or does she die? I think we in the audience can pretty much pick up it instantly. Of course, she's going to die, or where there's the drama going to come from. But I think where it's interesting is the characters don't know, and that Kirk still gets to cling to the hope that, oh well, maybe it is that she is supposed to live and maybe McCoy accidentally killed her, and that she's going to do great things, and like how he lights up thinking about that and how sad that is if you know the ending, whether you're watching it for the first time and you just know how this is going to go, or whether you're watching this for the 10,000th time and you know how this is going to go, and you see Kirk, his face light up. Oh, maybe she's going to be this brilliant, she's going to bring peace, and it's going to be this amazing thing, and she's going to be so great, and how proud he is of that, and just knowing that just adds to the tragedy. That so to me, it's not about whether we, the audience, are struggling with it. Is that does she live or die? We know she's going to die, whether we've seen the episode or not. But it's like watching the character's reaction to that, watching Kurt's reaction that just adds to the tragedy, where she's like, "Oh no! Look at how happy he is about it. Oh, she's gonna die." So I think it's really effective.
Yeah, I agree with all that. We can move on. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, actually, I guess I don't really have anything more to add on top of that. That's again, it's just one of those brilliantly done bits with it. And again, it's because we're playing with the philosophical question: what would you sacrifice for a better tomorrow? And the reality is Kurt could never really stay here anyway. He's supposed to go back in time. This is supposed to be a thing. So there's already this kind of limit and edge, and like, what can we do, not do, or anything like that. When the fact that she is right, I mean, it's like the baby Hitler question. Would you go back in time and kill baby Hitler if you had the opportunity to save all of those lives? It's the same type of thing where it's like, all of the choices are bad in one in one form of morality or another. You can't, make a baby pay for something their future self may or may not do, depending on what happens with that particular baby's life and everything. If you know for true, it's still a baby. And now this is someone who's like, oh, in order to save all these lives, this person has to die because they see what the human being can achieve. They see the right future, but it's at the wrong time. And in that sense, maybe because it undercuts that there's still a need to fight evil in the world, you can't shirk from that ability, even for peace. And in a way, for Roddenberry to write something like this, who very much does believe in that, is kind of supportive of like, look, we're aiming for better tomorrow, but we still got to deal with today. And that's sort of what this underlines with its question. And I think that, again, that's why it is so powerful. It's not just I'm sacrificing love. It's not just I have to save the future, which won't exist unless she unless the person I love dies. It's like, this is somebody who is right on it. And I think in today's parlance, he would just take her back to the future with her. There you go. You died. And now you can live in the world that you have, which would be a very cheesy and audience satisfying choice, but I don't think really tackles the question properly, because it's supposed to be tragic. And knowing all this and knowing the cost, having all of these costs laid up in front of us ahead of time, I think is what really makes that tragedy work.
Absolutely, 100%. All right, so I want to talk about McCoy, who in my notes I wrote down McCoy, the ticking clock.
McCoy!
Leonard McCoy! That because that's basically the function he serves, is the ticking clock. And I think it actually works very well. I think it works, honestly, much better than if had it been a criminal who was a drug dealer or whatever. Because it's not, and this is what I was saying, like when I was arguing with someone who liked that storyline better, because the episode is not about, it shouldn't, if you make it a drug dealer and it's about Kirk and Spock trying to find it, then the episode becomes about that. And it's not about that. It's not about McCoy. McCoy is just kind of a plot device, a MacGuffin, to throw everything into motion, and that makes it, and you can center the episode more on Edith and Kirk. This is where the heart should be. But having McCoy there does do a really good job to build tension, like that scene when he first comes in and sees the homeless person, and he grabs his face and kills himself with it because he doesn't know what it is. But the whole thing where he's still acting, he's still affected by the drugs, so he's still acting in case he murderers, assassins, and all that. Like it brings a nice sense of like eeriness to it. But then like having him there when he like shows up at the same shelter, and he like Edith like sort of sets him aside right before like Spock walks out, so they just barely missed each other. Like that was a great way to like just build this tension that like McCoy's here now, so whatever is going to go down is going to happen soon, and it's a great way to build to it. So Darrin, I'll start with you. Thoughts on Leonard McCoy?
No, I think he does play this perfectly, and I think they give him just what he needs to do. You're the crazed man that's just instigates the situation. I love how as he's coming down with that bow, he's like, looks like 20th century guys probably still needles and sutures. It just made me think what Star Trek 4 is like, dialysis? What are we, the Dark Ages? And he always carries dialysis pills with him. I don't know what McCoy keeps. He's like Batman with whatever he keeps in his little pouch there. But no, he does exactly what he needs to do to spur the situation, to honestly not really overdo it. But when we reflect on it, of course, this is about not saving a life, because McCoy would save a life. He's the doctor. If he goes back, he's less likely to kill somebody than to save someone. So, I mean, that just adds kind of an interesting element into it. And also his kind of, personal approach and connection in with Edith as well. When that happens is very nice, very suspectful of it, and then slowly beginning to trust, at least to a certain extent. I did appreciate when he said Chief Medical Officer, USS Enterprise. Didn't say Starship. That was a nice thing to keep the charade going, but still keep everybody honest, which, again, small little point, but I thought that was nice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a whole lot to add. I think that you sum it up well. I think, McCoy, he's kind of a MacGuffin. He is kind of there to move the plot forward, but I think that he is effective in that role. And I think that, yeah, I think that it just works really well the way that they use McCoy. And I remember when I was younger, I used to like question how I don't know, he just seems to be normal again later in the episode, but I guess we can just assume like the drugs wear off eventually and he just kind of comes out of it. So all of that is fine. But yeah, I think I commented when I did my video that Shatner putting on like the best performance of his life, he does have to slip back into the overacting William Shatner, but he goes, McCoy, Lord McCoy, like just shaking her. Then he has to, he can't help it. He has to slip back into his Shatnerisms for a couple seconds there, but I get a good big kick out of that.
Leonard McCoy, there's a thing on the wing.
Yeah, so there was another moment at the start of the episode that, again, I love this episode, obviously, but it's another what I think is somewhat cheesy moment. As a lot of times throughout Star Trek, someone would like punch someone and knock them out, and they'd play that, Donna sort of thing. This episode has the most over the top one when McCoy goes in a transporter room, and I think he just like does like a karate chop to the back, and it's like they got the whole like orchestra to like go at the same time, go like very loud, like over the top. It's like, all right.
The karate chop was the classic TOS. Knock somebody out with a karate chop on the neck.
Yeah, he actually did a great double because I watched this because I was like, ooh, that's surprising. He hits him in the kidney and then hits him up in the shoulder. So he gets the kind of like, oh, bend over. And then I get you that Spock point. That's always that point that knocks them out. But it was so great because he's like, pa, pa. It was super smooth. I think, I could feel like DeForest is like, I'm going to work on this, man. This is going to be the smoothest karate chop they have ever seen.
And I often wondered how well that McCoy would be able to operate the transporter if he was drugged out that much, like completely drugged out. And does he even know how to operate the transporter?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's probably standard Starfleet training. I'm sure everybody knows how to do it. And I don't know. I can make excuses for it.
Yeah. But they drugged out where
they do give a nice throwaway line of like, we were scanning the source of the disturbance, and that's where the transporters were set, which I guess is a nice, easy default setting because, yeah, he doesn't even like mess with anything. He like knocks them out and then like pulls up the levers and steps on the pad. I'm like, dude, you could be going anywhere. That's a lot of trust there, Doc. That's a lot of trust.
Well, he is really high. He's not really
Anyway,
we were scanning the third moon there. I guess we'll find McCoy's body later.
All right, so we'll get to the big tragic ending, which is absolutely, I don't know, it's beautiful. It's absolutely amazing. Again, I'll get my nitpick out of the way first of all before I get to the amazing.
Probably the same as mine. I think.
Probably the same nitpick because the whole thing is that Edith Keeler died originally, but then McCoy traveled back in time and saved her but then Kirk traveled back in time and stopped McCoy from saving her. So why was she in the? If McCoy and Kirk weren't there in the first place, why was she walking in the middle of the street? Because in the scene we see, she sees she's with Kirk, and he freaks out and runs towards Spock and McCoy the other side of the street, and she's slowly walking after him, and that's why she gets hit. So Kirk and Spock weren't there, then she wouldn't be in the street. So how did she die originally? And when Kirk and Spock weren't there and it was just McCoy, well, how could he be there to save her if she wasn't running after Kirk? Like, I don't know.
This is your Eddie's moment right here. Is she was going to die in a traffic accident crossing that street for whatever reason in whatever direction. These were just the particular circumstances that were around there, but the necessity for time to happen made those events occur.
Right. So it's like Final Destination.
Yeah, you get kind of a Final Destination thing. Yeah, the fact that she's returning back across the street, I think, is the killer. I think if she was just crossing over in the first way and they were on the other side and saw him at the hardware store or whatever, but that wouldn't have the same, I think, emotional effect. So I think they basically just had to make the choice of like, how do we tell this story and make it hit as quick as we can? But yeah, it's Eddie's. It's the Eddies that make it happen.
It's like Charlie from
Lost. That's exactly what I was saying. Like, no matter what, I mean, that's, I think, even though that doesn't really fit into Type 2 time travel, I think that's what I ultimately, how I forgave it. It was like, well, she was just destined to die, and originally it was some other way that she was going to get hit by the car.
It's a freaking love of Clark Gable is what killed her, man. Yeah. She wasn't going to see a Clark Gable movie. She would be fine.
Well, in
Clark Gable movie in the original timeline, just by herself or something.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, in Spock's tricorder thing, before timeline was changed, he said that she died in a traffic accident, some sort of traffic accident. So it's definitely not. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's just a really minor. I don't really buy the time is fluid thing, but it's not that big of a deal.
No, I have the same nitpick. I also was like, how? Wait a minute.
Simplify for expediency, folks. Simplify for expediency.
Well, they have to. If they didn't have, so they could have had her crossing the street normally, and then Kirk and McCoy spot her. But if they did that, then they wouldn't have been able to have Kirk go, McCoy, Leonard, McCoy, and you can't miss out that.
Well, see, what actually happened is they have always traveled back in time and done this. So why did she die in a traffic accident? Because McCoy had saved her, and Kirk had to go back and make her die. So that history has Kirk and Spock and McCoy were always back in the 30s. There's how you're
yeah, but
now you're mixing you're mixing Type 1 and Type 3.
But then how did she die to begin with then?
Yeah.
Okay, there were these Ferengi.
All right. But now getting to the good, because I do obviously love this ending. This is really why I love the episode so much, is that the ending is so tragic. It hits hard. And I used to, especially as a teenager, absolutely be in love with movies and stories and shows that had this kind of like tragic feel to it. This where you have this true love that is ripped away like very soon. And in this case, like, it was never meant to be, as you mentioned earlier. Like, Kirk's not going to stay back in the 20th century, so there was never going to be a happy ending on this. And the fact that he needs to do it in order to save the future. And Alyssa, I guess I'll let you say that. You have it as your username. Classic line. It just really, really hits really, really hard. Yeah, when he says that, when McCoy's freaking out, and do you know what you just did? He knows, Doctor. He knows. So like, and you see Kirk's response again. Good acting. His just utter devastation, utter like completely falling apart, and that's what really sells it. And I also absolutely also love when they go back. And her and Scotty are like, "Oh, it's so great, we're all safe now." And Kirk is just utterly devastated and just can't get out of it, and just simply says, "Let's get the hell out of here." and they beam up and leave. Like, that is such a poignant way. And the Guardian's like, oh yeah, come back and you can go for more time travel stuff. And Kirk is just so just out of it. He's not even paying attention to that. And just says, let's get the hell out of there. It's like really hits the tragedy of it. It's one of the hardest hitting tragedies, I think, in my opinion, for me, that I've ever seen. Which, again, why I love it so much. Okay, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
He knows, Doctor. He knows. Like, I think that reason why that line hits so hard is because, again, amazing acting by Shatner. Like, he doesn't say a word because he can't speak. So Spock has to speak on his behalf, because there's no way that Kirk in that moment is going to be able to muster up any words. And Shatner sells it. It's just amazing that he does such a good acting job. And then Leonard Nimoy coming in, also a great acting job, underrated, coming in just with that line. And I think it was Mark who said it earlier, that how it's logic, but yet you feel the emotion. Like, he knows, Doctor. He knows. And that it just hits me so hard every single time. I've seen it thousands of times, and it just hits me so hard. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be wrong because I haven't watched this episode since last year, but I believe that from the moment that Edith Keeler is killed, and I might be wrong, so you can correct me. I'm not sure if Kirk has another line until he says, "Let's get the hell out of here." Like,
no, I believe you're correct. Yeah,
which just shows like just how powerful, like just how impactful that tragedy was for him, that he can't speak. And then when he finally does, the Guardian Ferret was like, "Hey, let's go for a carousel ride through time, yay!" And Kirk is like, "Let's get the hell out of here." Although I think only Mark will get this reference. Maybe we've talked about this in another video, but in the sequel book, Imzadi, which was actually about Riker and Troy, but it involved the Guardian of Forever and all that. That Mark and I listened to the audiobook back in the day, and it was read by Jonathan Frakes, and he's rehashing that scene, and Jonathan Frakes goes, and Kirk says, "Let's get the hell out of here," and does a terrible job. So that's like a joke between Mark and I, like, "Let's get the hell out of here."
yeah, it's something I used to say to myself all the time. I think I still say it sometimes when I'm leaving. I was like, "Let's get the hell out of here."
Like, he totally ruins that line. But yeah, the way that Shatner delivers it is just, and the fact that he just can't say anything until, "Let's just get the hell out of here." That's all he can say. It's just so powerful.
And it does sound like he's like struggling to speak when he says it too. Like he's weakness, and that's all he can belt out.
No, I think that's funny why you're talking about how Jonathan Frakes said it and recreating it, because it's the understatedness that gives its power to it. And in fact, even the understatedness to all this is like where brilliant directing really pays off for the impact, because we've been waiting and building up for this situation all through, and then all of a sudden it all happens like dominoes. Boom, 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 and it's done. You're waiting, and then suddenly it's over. It's, "Oh yeah, Dr. McCoy said this." McCoy? Leonard McCoy? Yeah, but it's the shock, like, "Oh my God, he's here, you've got it." He's over there, runs, he comes out, they all embrace together, and she's gone. I mean, it's quick, and you are right. Not only does he not say anything, he never looks back. As he turns and sees Edith, and you hear Spock go, "Captain, no," whatever, he turns, grabs McCoy, and never looks back. Throughout all of McCoy's things, throughout the He Knows Doctor, he knows when he breaks away and stumbles against the wall, he never looks back at Edith. And then I think when he comes through the the Guardian, I don't think he looks back at the Guardian either. I think he walks through and just and just stands there looking forward, and then they ask, and he's like, let's get the hell out of here. I mean, again, it's just, you're right. He's completely done. He's never looks back. He's just it's great directing choices that allows the great acting moments to happen, that allows the great emotion to wrap up the story that's being told. So yeah, it's just, I just love how quick that bit is. And that was the one thing I was paying attention to, is just how much he is. It's like, I can't acknowledge that. And it's like, and in a way you say with the time travel, not only does he stop McCoy from saving her, he could in his own mind blame himself for her crossing the street in the first place. Not only did I not save her life, I actually killed her. Again, I don't know how he's processing it at all, but it is those series that is kind of, you can see that happening in his face. And that's just, they make good choices. And the fact that the episode then ends. We don't have the denouement afterwards when they're saying, all right, Captain, we put a no travel buoy around the ship. And are you holding up? It's just going to be a while. Fuck. Before I can move on.
It would have been really, really tone deaf if they tried to end on one of those stupid jokes.
That's what I was thinking too. Like,
that was very human. I see no need for insults, Doctor. God, I hated those endings so much. I don't think season 1 did them, or at least not as much. So that's why season 1's better.
No, because it was Chekhov's idea. Again, as soon as Chekhov shows
it's all his fault.
I love Chekhov. Really I do not mean that I am harping on him.
I never thought of this before, but you're right. Chekhov ruined Star Trek.
Yeah.
I think that's what they mean by Chekhov's gun.
Well, yeah, because wasn't Space Seed a season 1 episode?
It was, yeah.
Which is why when he mentions like Chekhov, aha, I recognize you. Oh, really? I don't think you two ever met.
Well, do you know the story behind that? That Walter Koenig realized that he was like, hey, I wasn't in that episode, but he didn't say anything because he was afraid that they would recast that as a different character, and he would have less scenes. So he didn't want to have less scenes. And I think that they came out later and said, yeah, he's right, we would have put somebody else in there.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that part of it.
Yeah. Put Tulu or whatever in there in his place. So he just kept his mouth shut because he didn't want to have fewer scenes. But he's like, hey, I wasn't in that episode.
Hey, but then wouldn't Chekhov have become the captain of the Excelsior? We would have changed history completely. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah.
All right, so we can go ahead and wrap things up here. So we'll get to the normal question, I guess. Alyssa, you can just restate what you stated earlier, where you have this on your particular countdown.
This is my number 1. This is my favorite Star Trek episode of all time, and for many reasons. And like I said at the start, a lot of it does have to do with nostalgia, because it is the first Star Trek episode that really impacted me as I was a young person, growing up, and then it's one that I could appreciate more as I got older, and just a one-of-a-kind acting job by William Shatner, one-of-a-kind directing, just and one of the greatest time travel stories ever told, and just everything, and easily the best romance that Star Trek has ever done, by far. I did a top 10, I think, on the best romances, and by far, this was number 1 by a long shot. There are some long-term romances that they do a good job on, but especially with single episode love stories, those are really, really hard to do, because it's hard to have a real believable love a love story within a single episode. I did say yesterday's Enterprise also does a pretty good job at it, but it's a really hard thing to pull off. So they were able to pull this off and to just have this impact of this tragedy and the time travel and everything. This is the greatest Star Trek episode ever made, and Stephen Kennedy can go around being wrong, but this is, to me, clearly the greatest Star Trek episode ever created. Although you have this at your number 4, I have no qualms about that either. If you have it in your top 5, your top 10, I think you're doing well for this episode.
Yeah, actually, I got a question. Was there a debate or thought of bringing Joan Collins back to have Edith Keeler in Generations, as opposed to the love of his life
there was.
Oh, was there?
That was. I think there was an idea they had originally, but then for some reason
they just used some random.
That would have been a baller move. Well, I don't know. She's still alive. They could do one of those, CGI bits they did of the whatever other Star Trek thing. I haven't finished actually looking at.
I mean, they could have just had her be her age that she is, and just be some alternate history.
They could have just done the back of her. I think that's what they did, because they were like, oh, just the outline of some person that Kirk was talking about that was his love that I don't remember. Anyway, just. That would have been a cool idea.
Is this higher, lower, around the same?
Well, I mean, I think I have to agree with Alyssa in the sense that you're getting into the top 5. Does it really matter what its actual position is? But no, I mean, it might be a little bit higher, because I got to agree with Alyssa. This kind of has everything. It is the perfect summation of what Star Trek is. It has very powerful. It has, just the imagery on it is iconic. It kind of has everything in its episode. And again, still watching it today, it's well done. It's well paced. It moves very well. It gets its emotion across and still gets you tearing up at the end, even if you're trying not to be. So now I know at least one of the other episodes that we will be talking about soon. So, I mean, even kind of comparing up to that, I'm like, yeah, but they're both great in their own individual ways. So I think that's really where the taste issue comes in. So about here, maybe a little bit higher, maybe have to, once we finish out the rest of the top 5 here, we will, we'll have a second discussion if I need to reorient anything of where I expect, but I think it's right around the top area where it's supposed to be.
So one of my commenters, Tyler Cease, made a comment earlier today. He said he wasn't able to make it to the live stream, and he wanted me to ask you and Alyssa what your favorite and least favorite episodes of Star Trek was. And I told him Alyssa's, because that's, this is the favorite. And am I correct, Alyssa? We share the least favorite episode, that we both think the same episode is the worst.
We do. Yeah.
Was that like number 850 or something at this point?
So, Darrin,
I don't count them all down in order, but if I were to do like the top 20 worst, there is one that stands out as the absolute worst, and it just hits me where it hurts on a personal level, and that's why it's my least favorite. And
it's always been my worst too. And Darrin, you probably just watched this recently. It's the episode of Deep Space Nine where Quark gets the sort of sex change thing. And
Profit and Lace.
Yeah, Profit and Lace.
I actually think I got 5 minutes into that and I think I could skip this one and not really miss anything.
Very wise.
No, there were a few of those where I'm like, this may come back and bite me on the butt. They're going to be like, oh no, about halfway through this turns into like one of those legendary episodes. But no, I had a feeling. So thank you. I feel good about my choices now.
Legendarily bad.
Norman Buckwald also with us.
Also agree. Yeah. But so anyway, Darrin, I don't know if you want to. I thought maybe you might want to save that till we get to my number 1. or if you even have a favorite and least favorite Star Trek episode.
Well, I mean, we have hit some of my favorite ones between this one, yesterday's Enterprise. Most of the time travel ones always kind of like have a particular touch with me. Was it Year of Hell, which we did last month, was excellent. So I'll probably have to wait till we get up a little bit more, because it's just I haven't rewatched a lot of these since as much as
well,
y'all
do you have
have.
one in particular you would call your absolute favorite?
Oh, actually, yesterday's Enterprise might actually be one of
That'd
mine.
be it. Okay.
Might be it.
Number
But
one.
like I said, this is. But rewatching this one, I was like, oh, this is definitely the best of the original series, and yeah, definitely in the top 5. I mean, once you watch it, it has such an impact, and All Good Things is kind of a fun wrap up, but it almost goes a little too far, and so it tries to tackle too much. And also, now that we've seen what the crew looks like actually older, it's sort of hilarious to rewatch. But
I think I said when we covered that episode that it's kind of splitting hairs and with the top 10, but it's the Troy and Worf thing that prevented it from being in my top 5. But
sure,
that slight thing,
once you get up there, it's only little things. It's little things that small racist cops that can really just upset them.
Yeah. But is there do you know of an episode off that you can think of that you would call the worst, or is it just?
Oh, I've wiped that from my memory.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's I've tried to do the right thing with that. No, there's some early TNG episodes. I think there's probably 1 or 2 with Wesley that I'm just like, I don't ever need to see this again. But no, I couldn't say off the head. The hippie one from the original series, which was mentioned before, is pretty bad. There's not a whole lot in there. Some of the bad ones at least have fun lines or little moments you can reflect back on. Again, Yangs and the Cons. We stop. That's trying to read We the People. Yeah, they stick in your mind, but they're not good episodes. But no, the other ones I've probably wiped. But I'll see if I can come across and have that for maybe one of our.
What about the one with they were talking about earlier with Dr. Crusher and the candle
and the ghost candle? I don't know.
That's my least favorite TNG one. I think it's the worst.
I had a crush on Gates McFadden when I was a little bit younger, so
really?
I mean, I don't know if I could really say that.
Well, unless you were a space ghost, Darrin.
Yeah.
You never had a shot with her.
It's just like I just need one of those etheric candles, man. It's all gonna be good.
All right. So we can go ahead and wrap up this discussion here. It's been fun. It's been a blast. Let's see. We had a lot of people in the chat join us. Norman and Brandon was here earlier. Steven, of course, and Jordan, and everyone else who happened in. Thanks so much for joining, everyone who's watching. And the archives, thanks so much for checking us out. And thanks so much for joining us for that. And of course, big thanks to, as always, special guests Alyssa and Darrin. Thank you so much for joining. Now, if you want to give a quick shout out to what you're up to, Darrin, I'll start with you since I know you're always up to so much on YouTube nowadays.
Yeah. The cobwebs that is my YouTube channel. No, because I'm having too much fun over here talking Star Trek and such episodes. And in fact, I'm heading back over to Rob's channel, Smirking Gun Reviews, probably sometime this week. We just got to nail down a day. We're going to talk about stuff that we're watching. Current things that are exciting us, things that we like, maybe some things we don't like. Everybody likes a good rant. So you can check me out with Smirking Gun Reviews. Probably, like I said, sometime this week we'll be coming out with the What We Watching special. And then otherwise, you'll catch me there and you'll catch me here, but never on my own channel. Not anymore. Well, I mean, at some point you will. I haven't come up with a good thing to do. Worth. I'm having too much fun with everyone else.
Oh, my turn?
Yep.
Yeah, you can follow me on Alyssa Jean's Reviews. You can also follow me on Facebook at Alyssa Jean's Reviews. I'm at Blue Sky at Queen Alyssa Jean. Over on Alyssa Jean's Reviews, I haven't been doing as much this year. However, I do have a pretty busy month of December. Join me next Saturday, December 14th, 4 p.m. West Coast time. I will be doing a special live chat with Wine where I'm going to talk about my favorite Star Trek memories of watching Star Trek as a youth. I got jealous of Mark and Jordan Johnson did a video a little month or two ago on Enchantment of Eternity, and I was like, I want to talk about that too. So I'm just going to get a bottle of wine and I'm going to reminisce about Star Trek memories. And so come join me and reminisce with me. And we'll probably talk about other random stuff too. We always do. So come join me for that. Once Lower Decks is finished, I will be publishing my review for episodes 6 through 10. And then I've got 2 end of the year videos where I will do the first one will be giving out my awards for the year. I say awards, some of them are negative, but typically I do overrated, underrated, worst episode. I think I'm going to mix it up a little bit this year. Might be doing slightly different awards, so stay tuned for that. That'll be sometime before the end of the year. I don't have a date yet for it. And then also at the very end of the year, I will do my top 10 television shows of the year, as I do every year. So lots of stuff happening in December in Alyssa Jean's Reviews. And then radio silence for months after that. I probably won't do much for a little while, but a bunch going on in December. So come over to Alyssa Jean's Reviews and check me out.
Cool. And if you're finding me for the first time, my name's Mark. Channel's Enchantment of Eternity. I'll be only got 3 more left. Only 3 more left in my top 25 Star Trek episodes. I'll be doing that once a month. Later on this month, in a couple of weeks, me and Alyssa will be back to talk about Star Trek Lower Decks. Because that will be ending soon. And might have another live stream coming up towards the end of January also. Yeah. Otherwise, covering Star Trek Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, 1 episode at a time, and Lower Decks. I'll also be doing my top 10 favorite shows of the year. I think I've only, by the time we get to it, I would have seen 13 shows, so it's not going to be, might include every show I saw. Just didn't see that many shows. But anyway, so that's what's coming on my channel. You can check that out. Be sure to check out these wonderful other people as well, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining. I'm gonna get the hell out of here.
Let's get the hell out of here.